I think what's interesting for the newer agents, take note.
Yeah.
Take note of some of your colleagues that are really struggling right now and try to understand what that's about, and don't be them in the next market shift.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me. You got me out of my home office where I've been I'm on endless Zooms, and I'm like, oh, this is an in-person meeting. So I got on a scooter. It's a little chilly, but I got on a scooter and headed on over.
It's funny because I've known your name for many years, and then we met not too long ago at YPO, Young Presidents Organization.
Yeah.
Call out to that.
Right.
I've been a huge fan. How long were you in YPO for?
2017 is when I started.
Nice. I think I'm second year right now, so I've had a great experience. Been great.
Yeah, me too.
Your story is so interesting because you owned a brokerage, and you're one of the few people that sold an unsellable business. Agents out there are going to be very jealous of this. How did that happen?
I got out.
How did you get out?
Oh my gosh.
Right? Doesn't that agents always say that to you? Like, how do I get out?
True.
And what you did afterwards was you created an awesome platform, which I'll help you explain more, where you help agents get out, or you help agents financially with taxes.
Yes.
All that stuff. Why don't you tell us about how you sold it and the transition? I'm just going to let you go.
I got out twice, incidentally.
Okay.
First, I got out of production as an agent, and then ended up getting out of brokerage. I didn't start the business to get out of it. So I'll back up. So I'm from Iowa originally, born in Wyoming. I grew up in Iowa and graduated from high school and went on the road with a musical organization, singing and dancing.
Nice.
Called Up With People. It was amazing. So I had a wonderful time and moved to the area in 1999 and got a job cold calling for a staffing company, doing 100 cold calls a day, literally ringing the bell. I actually liked it because for the first time in my life, I saw a direct correlation between activity and income. And I was like, oh, so if I make X number of calls a day, I get Y number of appointments, and I get Z number of signups, and then I can make, I think it's interesting. So I did pretty well with that. But after about a year or so, the tech bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s hit. And I also felt that it wasn't particularly meaningful.
Yeah.
It was kind of a grinder, and I like a grinder, but I like a grinder with meaning.
Sure.
And so I was watching an infomercial late one night on how to buy real estate, no money down, with Carlton Sheets.
Okay.
So some of you might remember, right? Like, he's like, 90 days, you'll be rich and drinking a martini on the beach. I'm like, oh, that's great.
Sure,
like,
that's what I want.
I would love to do that. Yeah. I have no money to put down. Let's do it. I actually did buy the course. It inspired me to buy a piece of real estate, and I did buy a piece of real estate by borrowing $3,000 from my only friend. I did an FHA 203K loan, Capitol Hill, foreclosure, renovated it, and sold it within like 6 months and made $40,000. And I thought I was the bomb.
Yes, that's amazing. Well, first of all, the fact that the info commercial works, how about props to that guy?
Right. And I was like, why doesn't everybody do this? Of course, now I realize I was lucky. I mean, I could have easily lost all that money, but things went well for me, and I certainly learned a lesson that sometimes you just need things to work well for you to get ahead, and that's what happened in that moment. And it was a neighborhood real estate agent who actually cold called my open house because I was doing a for sale by owner. I eventually hired her, and she's the one actually who said, hey, you ought to consider getting into real estate full time. So that was my full into real estate moment in 2001 as an agent.
That's awesome.
Selling houses.
And joined Keller Williams at the time? Or
no, this was before Keller Williams was even around the D.C. area. Yeah. So I did door knocking and cold calling, did $10 million that first year in production, $20 million, and then $30 million the third year.
Yeah, $10 million, especially back then. What was the average price back then?
Probably $200,000, $250,000.
That's a lot of volume for 1 year.
It was a lot. And in hindsight, people were like, how did you do it? I was like, I worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and I door knocked literally for 5 to 6 hours a day, regardless of the weather.
That first job helped you a little bit because
it
trained you to just know that it's a numbers game, right? And
that's what it was, Ladney. I was like, I could take the same principle of X number of calls probably equals Y number of door knocks, which somebody's going to be crazy enough to list their house with me. And sure enough, after like 100 doors, somebody was like, that's odd. We were just talking. Yeah, come on in. And I was like, oh, shoot. Like, I don't even know what to do.
That's awesome.
But I figured it out.
It doesn't hurt that you're easy to talk to and look at. So, I mean, that
helps
too. So
that
that's
good. Yeah. So after year 3, I had this experience where I was like, I wonder if I need to file taxes. Yeah, you do actually, turns out, need to file taxes and pay them.
Yeah.
And I had done neither. And by then I had, several $100,000 of income, of which I paid nothing in taxes.
Sure.
And, I was like, this is great, like so much money. And, meanwhile,
Yes,
turns
right?
out I actually
Sure.
owed half of it to the IRS.
Yeah.
So that was very painful,
Yeah.
honestly. But that gave me my first big inflection point where I realized, okay, great personality, sales skill, whatever, can take you so far. But my ambition was much larger than that. I had much bigger plans. I could see that I wanted to generate some concept of financial freedom, even though I didn't really have that defined at that point. And I knew that I had to transition from only sales skills to sales skills plus. I wasn't sure what the plus was, but I saw the big bill from the IRS and I was like, well, that sucks. And that's super painful. Clearly, I need to add something to my repertoire in terms of skill sets. And that's about when I discovered Keller Williams as a franchise. I was like, interesting. That is a business. And if I could grow that and my sales business, maybe I could then evolve to something different.
That's very cool.
So that was my first big inflection point, I think, as a professional, was love sales, and that only took me so far. And I had to then bring on something else.
And when you did Keller Williams, so it was part of the allure there was like, they have a lot of tools. They're going to educate you in things because obviously you're good at sales, but you're kind of saying, I need the education on taxes and probably a lot of other things.
So I was thinking, I got to figure a bunch of stuff out. And then I realized, well, actually, Gary Keller and the Red Book, the so many agents are familiar with, whether you're with Keller Williams or not. He had actually been toiling away in his lab since the 80s and had already figured out, how does an agent build a business? It's like, wow, if I just did some of what he tells me in this book, then I could be wildly successful. So I was drawn to that for myself, but I was also drawn to it with the idea that other agents would probably also find it valuable. And the vehicle for other agents was the brokerage. And I had some local partners that had a similar inclination. And so we all partnered together and formed Keller Williams Capital Properties on Capitol Hill in 2006.
2006. You had it till 2019 and sold the company.
Yeah.
One of the very rare things to do in this industry is sell the company. And I hear it all the time. And even this is an interesting time in real estate. There's some really big teams that we work with. And I was just talking to one of the owners of the big teams. I was just like, I'm just tired. And I actually went and took a, kind of more of a managerial job, because you hear all the time, like, how do I get out, or how do I get out of production?
So yes, I grew the brokerage and eventually did sell it. And I think in that process, I learned a few things that are relevant today for agents who want to quote unquote get out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is your ability to sell or transition your business to somebody else is entirely dependent on how much of that business is solely reliant on you.
Sure.
And the truth is, most of our businesses in real estate are entirely or mostly reliant on the principal.
Yeah.
And as long as that's the case, the business has really not much monetary value to anybody else, except for maybe somebody in your organization that could over time take it over, or some sort of referral fee structure. The brokerage, though, allowed me with my partners to grow a platform where we had 1,000 agents, 7 different offices. It was certainly no longer reliant on Brandon Green as a personality.
Right.
It had staff, and scale matters in terms of thinking about transitioning. So I could see that along the way, that if I could grow it to a certain size, but the next is you got to have a buyer for it. I mean, ultimately, the buyer for these sort of businesses are people that are already probably working closely with you. And luckily at the time, that was the case for me. I was able to do that. I think for agents who are thinking about selling their business, or even just partially selling their business, it is at least a 3-year horizon that you've got to be thoughtful about it and planning for it accordingly. And then you kind of need to manage your expectations about it. Nobody's writing you a gigantic check. You're not going to retire on an island. I didn't. I'm still here. You can do well, but you can't retire island type of thing. So one of the things that really helped me was saying to myself and talking with my family, like, well, what do I expect from this business for my future? And could I come up with a number that would help me transition into my next chapter, but wasn't some windfall for the rest of my life? Because that was not realistic.
I think it's very interesting you say. So I had a very similar situation. I built a business in San Diego, Sport and Social Club, and I had these big dreams, and I was expecting I would never work again if I wanted to, whatever. And I ended up with an amount of money to allow me to transition to a title company, and if that makes sense, right? And so that is a win, though. I was burned out of that job. So by me moving on for less than I thought I'd ever get, it allowed me to get into a title at the right time. There are advantages, too, of getting time and getting into certain industries at the right time and all that stuff also.
I think a more practical way to think about it is that, to say, could we as agents in the business construct an organization where you could take a sabbatical? Maybe it's a permanent sabbatical and you never come back, or maybe I know an agent in South Carolina who recently took a 1-year sabbatical. This issue of being burned out is a major problem, and with some planning, some work on your finances, you can position yourself to be able to take a sabbatical for a year or two and recharge or pivot into an entirely different element of the business.
How long did you have a time off from when you sold it to when you started your current business?
19, I was pretty well out then, and then I started Alchemy in 2022.
Tell us about Alchemy and how many people
Yeah.
come to you, and are you helping people with like, hey, I want to get out of this eventually, let's create a plan? Is that part of what you're doing for a lot of people or some people, or is it all?
I get that a lot.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when push comes to shove, there's not a lot of execution around it.
Yeah.
So it is a bit more of an aspirational idea that most
Yeah.
people have because they're not willing to do the work.
Yeah.
But if you are, like, I got a good plan for
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Right? Okay, there you go.
But most people come to Alchemy not so much with a plan or a desire to get out of it, but they're trying to solve for some sort of pain point. Either they are not achieving their financial goals, their sense of financial freedom is elusive, undefined, or they just feel like they're not meeting their potential. Other people come to Alchemy with real financial challenges. You know, they may be like I was, 3 years not filing taxes and having these big tax bills and trying to work it out. Some people are just looking for some additional clarity to align with their goal.
One thing you and I were discussing a previous time was financial freedom. Is that something that your company is focused on? What does that look like?
The answer is yes, because while the company, we do bookkeeping, we do taxes, we do payroll, right? But those are just things that need to be done on the way to somewhere, right? And most people are in business because they have some sort of personal financial goal they're trying to achieve. So we work really hard to orient people to that and help them define that. Say, yes, let's do your taxes, but let's not forget why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Let's do your P&L and your balance sheet and have you meet with our financial coach once a month to look at it. But remember why we're doing this. The thing about financial freedom is if you ask most people, like, tell me, what does financial freedom look like to you? You get a lot of emotional responses, such as the ability to do whatever I want anytime I want, to go anywhere, to, a lot of freedom orientation, because entrepreneurs, we all love freedom.
Right.
Once in a while, you'll get something specific like, oh, I want to be able to send my kids to college with no debt, or I want to buy a beach house or something like that. Level 1. Then you say, well, great, I love that, but what's a number around that? Like, how much would that actually cost? So your idea of do anything you want, anytime you want, well, how much would that be? Like, if I could write you a check to, like, how much do you need for that? Right. And that's usually where it falls flat, is people are like, well, I don't really, they haven't done the math around the actualization of financial freedom. So we'll help with that. And if that has been done, then the question is, well, what is the actual plan to get there?
Yeah. And I mean, I'd love to get what are the answers typically? Because I actually have done a little research on this. I remember a guy I knew, YPO, about 10 years ago. He told me there is a number, and I'll bring it up. But like, what is the number you typically get from people that believe what the number is?
Most people are surprised that it's lower than they expected it to be.
Okay.
Actually, most of the time, it's between $250,000 and $500,000 a year in passive income.
Yes.
And I think people have this idea, most of them, it's millions of dollars a year.
Yep.
But when you start to do the math around whatever lifestyle it is you're happy with, you're trying to achieve, by and large, it's like this $250,000 to $500,000. Now, you're going to get $250,000 to $500,000 in passive income.
Yeah.
Right. You need to have $10 to $20 million in assets in order to generate that. That's not an insignificant thing to do. For most people, the number around freedom is not 7 figures. Actually.
Yeah.
It's really closer to 250 to 500. Individual for everybody, but in working with a lot of people, that tends to be the case. And so you say, okay, great. If it's 250, we need, rough math, $12 million in assets, pushing off 250,000. Like, what's the plan to get $12 million in assets? How much do you have now? Oh, I got my rental property. I have a portfolio with Ameriprise, and I've got 3. I'm like, great. So we're on our way. Now, how do we get the rest?
Sure. No, that makes sense. What the guy told me back then, 10 years ago, was if you have $7 million, then you're getting 5% return. You're making $350,000 a year. And that should be that should allow you, but also you still have that base of money too. That's true. It's not.
That's a good.
Even if you had to dive into that, for 20 years, I mean, you still have enough to survive.
That's right. So, and that's a really good number, a good way to think about it. So somebody could really sink their teeth into that. Then you'll say, okay, that's $7 million producing 5% return in cash, which means it's probably not sitting in rental properties in that stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably invested in corporate bonds or something that's relatively conservative and churning off 5%. So the construction of that outcome requires probably an evolution of the portfolio over time. Therein lies the details of how you get there. But for most people, if you start to walk through that, then all of a sudden you realize, okay, I do actually need to do bookkeeping for my business.
Yeah.
Oh, I do need to get a handle on my taxes.
Sure.
Oh, I do need to do, like, you can't get to a $7 million portfolio and be behind on your taxes.
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. And so when you were coming up with the company, company concept? Was it more on, hey, there was a time I owed all this tax money, I need that help? Or is it more on, all right, once you have money, these are the things you should be doing, if that makes sense?
Probably neither. I mean, I started the company because of the experience I had in growing my career and learning the hard way about money and realizing that the training around finance is limited. We have plenty of training in the industry on lead generation and conversion and listing presentations and marketing.
In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard of a company that offers what you offer specifically to agents.
No, it's extremely rare. So I started Alchemy actually as a training company.
Yeah.
And because I'm passionate about it, I love to do that. And in that process, I realized, well, people also need the services. So people want to learn, but they don't want to do the books. They don't. And I referred them to people, and so I was like, no, I'm just going to do it. So I started the company. I'm like, we'll do the training because I love doing that. It's a leader into our organization. But then we will do your books. We will do your payroll. We will do your taxes.
Yeah.
And that has really been a huge component to fulfilling the training promises that we make so that people have an outlet to now actually go execute.
Right.
Which is, of course, where all the goods are made.
But the market is tough right now. I've seen some partnerships break up, which I think happens a lot of times when you're in really tough markets. I'm seeing people get out of the industry. It's a hard market. I mean, did you go through those yourself?
I did,
What are your thoughts of them? What are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, this has been a tough market. And we know historically tough markets last about 5 years. This is year 3. We probably have 2 more. What I think has been interesting about this tough market is it has been really tough on legacy players. And it's been a gift for people coming into the business that have media skills and nothing to lose.
Right. It's fair.
So for the legacy players out there, those that were quickly able to make the difficult decisions around right-sizing their staff, and a lot of legacy players had really leveraged themselves away from the transaction by several layers. Those that have pulled themselves back in and have made difficult decisions to lay people off have been able to pivot and do pretty well. I think it's been a lot about mindset. As agents, we're often very caring about people. Literally on my way here, I was texting with an agent who probably should have made a big layoff a year and a half ago, but just now did it. And it's so late, I'm not sure he can fully recover. On the flip side, agents who have come into the business that know how to market in today's environment through new media, like podcasts and other things, and are deploying things like I did early on, work 7 days a week and door knock or whatever, right, are cleaning up. So I'm actually really excited about the market because for those agents, we've been in this shifted market long enough. This is the only market they know. And it's become a normalized situation. If you're listening to the podcast, you are probably having either one of those 2 experiences. Like, I don't know what you all talk about. This is the best year I've ever had. Or you're still kind of down in the dumps.
It's so accurate. So I just spoke with someone who's younger and doing extremely well.
Yes.
And I thought this is interesting because I hadn't heard this before. He goes, I want the rates to stay where they are. He's like, it's not, if they stay where they are, there's less competition. And, if rates go to 4 or 5%, I mean, there's too much activity in a sense. And he's like, it's just good for the business. It keeps others out and it allows some predictability.
It's true. Sense. And in some ways, this is just the natural cycle of business, right? But all of us eventually become the legacy players.
Right. Yeah.
So I think what's interesting for the newer agents, take note.
Yeah.
Take note of some of your colleagues that are really struggling right now and try to understand what that's about and don't be them in the next market shift, right? And a lot of it's about just resiliency, but also adaptability. I think for a long time, there was a lot of, woohoo, it's going to get better, as is always the case when markets shift.
Yeah.
But, those that have been rapid on their feet are doing extremely well. It's no doubt a weird market, but I think we've got a couple more years.
It's funny because, I think people are optimists in a sense, and they think the market's going to recover sooner than it is. And when things started going, like rates all of a sudden went to 7, I kept having people be like, rates are going to lower in 6 months. And it was always 6 months. And it was a year. And I was like, I pulled up the historical chart. I'm like, that's 15 years.
That's 15
rates,
years.
Yeah. I think we need to be prepared for whatever. Now, so, the good news is we're mentally prepared to be in this for a long time. And we've been, things are good over here. Yes, are we making a lot of money? No. But, we're surviving and there will be another side.
If you're doing well now, or even just hanging on, you're actually gaining a lot of market share.
Exactly, right.
So when the market shifts, the folks that have left the business or, essentially have left the business but haven't actually left the business, they're not coming back. So you're going to clean up a lot as the market then rebounds. So I'm very optimistic. As a matter of fact, I wrote a blog post recently that this is the year of the agent. And I say that because if you think about the last couple of years, a few things have happened. One, you have a lot less competition than you did just a couple of years ago. Maybe hanging on in terms of NAR members still, but they're not doing any business.
That makes sense.
They're no longer your competition. Second, all these lawsuits that have been in and out. For the most part, brokerages, title companies, other institutions have taken it on the chin. Not the agents so much. Agents were like, hey, settle that lawsuit for me. I appreciate it.
Right.
And by and large, the agent splits haven't changed.
It's fair.
So like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm making the same third. Like, in Alchemy, we're not really seeing a whole lot of difference in how much agents are actually making in commissions. So
Great point. We actually have a monthly data tracker
yeah,
that shows commission splits. We have not seen
I haven't
much
seen a
of
whole lot of movement
movement.
around
Yeah.
that. So you have less competition. All your colleagues in the business and other roles have actually shielded you from a
Yeah.
lot of financial liability from all the stuff that's going on around here. Like, wow, good for you. Like, go
Yeah.
for it.
And that is a great way to look at it, and I think you're right on that.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So our team, we put together rapid fire questions. Biggest pet peeve.
My biggest pet peeve is when you say you're going to do something, do it. And it's the littlest things. And my team knows this. This is the thing. Like, if you say you're going to do something by 4 o'clock, damn well better be done by 4.
Sure.
Or if the world has changed, then you can say at 3, hey, I know I'm supposed to have this at 4, but I'll have it to you by 9.
Sure.
No problem. But like the ghosting of one's commitment drives me insane. And I can only control that. I mean, probably nowhere, but I can attempt to control it in my little world, and I try. By the way, that does not work at home.
It does not.
At all.
Yeah. Who's the best negotiator? You or your husband?
I'd say probably me. He doesn't like to negotiate. As a matter of fact, he recently made a decent sized purchase.
Yeah.
I was like, make him an offer, like 10, 15%. Because I can't do that. I'm not going to do that.
Personal mantra or quote that keeps you motivated.
Be on top of it. Admittedly, I'm relentless. I expect others to stay on top of it that are around me, for sure. That's a mantra I live by. And the reason I have that mantra is because I really believe that if you're going to do it, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we doing here? Like, we live one life.
Yeah.
So go all out. That's really how I live my life.
How do you keep track of things to stay on top? What's your organization system look like to do so?
System-wise, we use a lot of systems. I'm a Google freak, so I've got all the Google calendars and so forth. But I also delegate a lot. But I think my biggest practical thing that keeps me organized is I'm just all over the calendar function, so I know exactly what needs to happen each day. And at the top of the calendar, I'm putting things that I'm not doing, but I need to be aware of. So that helps.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I use a little task on the Google Calendar.
Yeah.
So I got all the schedule, but then I got the task, and you're checking those things off. It's very helpful.
In an inbox rule, you got to get the inbox has to stay under enough email so you can just see it on one page. If you have to scroll the next page,
I have a different approach. All right, ready? So my theory is
yes,
you can never win if you're trying to get to know emails. In fact, think about how you're like, oh, I'm going to open my phone and I'm going to delete these 5 messages.
Yeah.
So luckily, I'm fortunate enough to have an executive assistant that helps myself and Matt out.
That's perfect.
And so what we do is she puts everything into a started folder.
That's a good way to do it.
And so I just go to the start folder. Everything's there. Boom. I can go through it.
Well, and what I think is smart about that is you know yourself and you hire somebody to help you through that. And I think that is the hack. Either you're naturally organized or you're not. And it doesn't matter in terms of success. But if you're not naturally organized around that, then you bring people into your world that are.
You have to figure out a process.
And you figure out a process for it.
What's one thing you always keep in your car?
Altoids, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
That's always in my car.
I like it. Morning routine must have what?
Just 5 minutes to 15 minutes of meditation and the gym.
I mean, what's the advantage of meditating? And I've heard tons of people do it.
What I find it does is in the morning, I have 2 choices. I can either wake up and look at my phone and get into the day, look at emails, news, bank balances right away. Or I can take a few minutes of quiet contemplation, set my mind up for the day, set my intentions either by writing them down, then go have breakfast or go to the gym and then come back. And that little space between wake up and actually getting into the day through actual meditation or not sets things up so different. And I'm not perfect on it every day, for sure. There are absolutely days where I get up and I roll over and I'm looking at this stuff. And I just enter the day with anxiety versus...
So it releases anxiety. I mean, in a sense, it decreases it, removes it once you do that.
It better equips me for the whatever's coming at me that day to have that buffer between sleep and the day's stuff.
Yeah. What's the word people use to describe you that makes you proud?
I would say loving and also motivated, creative are also words I hear.
When you sold your company, did you have a period of boredom, or were you able, because you're a busy person and you were able to enjoy your time that you had all?
I was lost in the wilderness for like a year and a half. I completely felt like I lost my sense of identity, actually. And it was a rough little period. And I was also during COVID, so it was really weird.
Really boring.
It was boring. I guess it wasn't boring because I certainly found stuff to keep myself busy, but it was confusing. I eventually came out of that fog, but it took a while, no doubt.
To get you out of that, was it starting another company? Or Or like, what would you say it was that got you?
So I felt a real sense of urgency to start something new. And I had a coach at the time who was like, this could take you a while to reset.
Yep.
I was like, how much? Like 3 months? 4 months? He's like, no, could be a couple years. I was like, what? No way.
Yep.
I'm like, I'll be in something new in 6 months, 10 months maybe tops. So 6 months in, I'm at my home office doing my planning. My husband comes in, he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm getting on, it's a 6-month review. And he was like, a review of what?
Yeah.
A review for who?
Yeah.
Well, I got to get I was like, what exactly do you have to do? And I was like, I realized in that moment I was just operating off of an old pattern and I didn't actually have anything to do.
Yeah. Right.
And so I had to learn how to be in nothing for a while. Then I started investing in a bunch of stuff and getting into everybody else's business, which had mixed results at best. Then I was like, I just need to chill.
Yeah.
I need to do nothing for a while. So I did some traveling, did writing. I wrote a book, haven't published it.
Nice.
Will
you be?
Eventually.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to get back to that. But eventually, it was finally in the white space. It was in the silence that the good idea of alchemy came.
New ideas. Okay, so you're like, hey, I'm by myself. I have time. I'm listening to podcasts. You have no ideas. How do you determine if a new idea is the right idea? How did you give it a day? Do you give it a week? How do you think about that with alchemy? Did you know right away, or did it?
No, I definitely did not know right away. I had the inclination that financial training could be well received because I've been doing some form of that for a long time.
Yep.
I pulled together a focus group, and I was like, if I ran this course for 6 months, would you sign up? They're like, yeah, I'd sign up for sure. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And it was in the doing of it that I realized, this is the beginning of something, but actually we need to do all the services. It was an iterative process.
What's the last thing you Googled?
How long do hardwood floors need to cure before you can put down an area rug?
That's great. Give me some background if you don't mind.
Yeah. So we are this year going to open a venue in Maryland.
Awesome.
For
alchemy?
No. Entirely separate from alchemy.
Okay.
For corporate retreats.
Awesome.
Weddings, family reunions. We have a beautiful 66-acre historic estate in Maryland.
You telling me about this about a year ago. That's very cool.
We've owned it for a long time, and it's been a long time coming, and we're nearing the end of the renovation.
Awesome.
The hardwood floors are starting on Monday.
Nice.
And a rug vendor, because my husband owns a staging and design business. Yep. So he's in Las Vegas right now buying furniture. And his rug vendor was like, you cannot put this rug down on a brand new finished hardwood floors for 6 months. And I was like, I've never heard of that.
This rug?
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many house renovations I've been involved in. Many, many, many. And I've never heard of that. Sure. So I Googled it. Yeah. I find no information on that.
Okay.
I called my hardwood floor guy. He's like, that's crazy. Yeah. So I'm going to disregard that information.
I think you should.
But that was why I was
that is funny. That is funny. That's too good.
Yes.
There's agents out there. You have a wealth of knowledge you can help them with. What's the best way they can find you?
Yeah, go to our website. So it's alchemyofmoney.co. You can learn more about what we're doing, and if it's interesting to you and we can help you, you can book a call through that website. If you can get a healthy approach to taxes, you must get a healthy approach to taxes in order to achieve your idea of financial freedom. Those things are directly related, and it's a journey we all must take.
Pleasure to be with you. You're a great friend, great guy.
Thank you, Lad.
Glad you came on here, and thanks a lot.